right. Good evening, Star Trek family. Welcome to another Voyager 30 segment where we are celebrating the 30th anniversary of Star Trek Voyager all year long now at this point, because we have several more to go through December. Tonight we have a very special Q&A for you with somebody who worked on Star Trek, and I'm very excited to talk to him tonight, so we'll get to that in just a moment. I do want to remind everybody that in conjunction with our Voyager 30 celebration, we are raising money for charity throughout the rest of the year. It is for the St. Jude Children's Hospital, Research Hospital. So if you are able and willing to make a donation, we would appreciate your generosity. Any amount, large or small, really goes directly towards helping the children and their families while they are receiving life-saving cancer treatments. The link to do so is in chat, so please feel free to click that link, and you can do that at any point. The link is also on our Facebook page. All right, so my name is Mark Sickle, and I am your host of the Star Trek family. This is my lovely wife, Lisa, who is the co-founder of the Star Trek family. And tonight, we have the pleasure of welcoming a four-time Emmy Award-winning visual effects artist
Wow.
who worked on four of the Star Trek shows from the Next Generation through Enterprise and two of the movies. And I'm very excited to welcome you, Mr. Adam Howard.
Hey, thanks so much for having me. It's great to see you guys. Finally, we finally get to do this.
Yeah, finally, and I know sincerest apologies. We've
Oh,
rescheduled this several times because of work and schedule and
fine, it
whatnot.
happens.
We're just glad to have you. And I see an Emmy over your shoulder
No, I was gonna say that the
This
Emmy.
this this is the one that we won for Caretaker, the pilot episode of Voyager.
for
Um,
Voyager.
so that's for Voyager. This one is for First Contact, not First Contact, for the final episode of Next Generation. All good
All
things.
good things. Yeah,
And then Conundrum and Matter of Time up there. So yeah, pretty amazing. It always kind of
it,
blows my mind.
it is all
That
great
is
episodes. All
amazing.
great
Oh
episodes.
my God.
Uh, so let me start at the beginning. You're from Australia. Yes,
Yeah,
where
yeah.
from in Australia?
I'm from Melbourne. Grew up in Melbourne for 3 years when I was a little kid. I lived in Tokyo, which was great.
Mhm.
Had my first experience on a TV set in Japan. Had my first argument with a director in Japan at 5 years old. But yeah, it was Melbourne was great. Melbourne was a great place to grow up, and but my very first introduction to Star Trek was actually in Tokyo, and I saw the original series
Oh,
um, in Japanese.
oh wow.
Um, and at the time, I spoke kind of fluent Japanese as a little kid, and I don't anymore, but I used to. Um, and and so that was my first introduction to Trek. And then I remember when we went back to Australia, and I was 7 years old, and I was watching it on TV in Australia, and they were all speaking English. I was like, well, that's not right. That's not what it sounds like. But anyway, konnichiwa to Amber. Thank you. And so yeah, it was really great growing up in Melbourne, and I loved television. I loved movies. I knew from like age 5 that I wanted to work in this that weird thing on TV that they did those kind of things, but no one really knew what it was, and it was special effects at the time. Um, and um, and that was kind of my focus always to end up doing something like that. So my dad did plastic surgery at one point, and helping like car accident victims with reconstructed faces and stuff. And so I wanted to do that. And then I realized very quickly that I wasn't getting the kind of grades that would allow me to do that. My brother was, but I didn't. Um, and so I remember Dad said to me, you should be work toward your strengths. And I was very lucky to have this incredible art teacher in high school, a guy called Rick Roughton, who I will always praise for my entire life, because he was the one who said, look, he actually came to the house one Saturday, and I thought I was in trouble with the school. And he said, no, no, you're fine. I just want to talk to your mum and dad. And he sat mum and dad down in the living room and he said, look, he has a gift. He's a great artist, and he needs to do that as his life. Um, and I would like you to support him. And so what he was encouraging them to do was take me out of the school I was in and put me in a school that would help feed me into what became Monash University in Melbourne and the graphic design course. So
Hmm.
that's exactly what we did. They said yes. I nearly fell off my chair. And we made the move. And he spent the next year helping me get a portfolio together that would really get me into that course. So I did that course and I finished and I graduated with a diploma in graphic design,
Mhm.
um, and graphic design with majors in illustration and animation. But animation in those days was all cell animation, one sheet of paper at a time, one sheet of acetate at a
Ooh.
time.
Mhm.
And but all the time that I was learning that stuff, I was still watching TV and growing up on great things like, Gilligan's Island and Get Smart and the Banana Splits and shows that were having an enormous impact on me. I just didn't understand why at the time. But of course, one of the shows that had the greatest impact on me all through that time was Star Trek.
Hmm.
Uh, anyway, so I finished training. I had in my final year of the course, I had a work experience at ABC Television in Melbourne, and it I realized, okay, this is my calling. I'm going to do graphics and television, and at the time, graphics and television was all handmade. So because there were no computers of any kind anywhere doing this kind of stuff, and there was no Photoshop, there was no Apple, there was no Mac, there was
Oh my
nothing.
gosh.
And so I was working on things like that, the news. And so you'd have, the news anchor sitting there and the thing over his shoulder with the box that would say a picture at the time of like Reagan and Gorbachev in conference somewhere. And it would say, high-powered conference or something. And so that was literally a graphic that we would have to go into color magazines and find color photographs of each of the politicians, and then we would cut them out with a scalpel and glue them down and on like Pantone paper and rub down Letraset text. Everything was handmade, and then it was literally just physically stuck in front of a camera,
Oh,
and they
wow.
cropped it off, and that was what was next to the newsreader. So I kept on going back after I graduated. I would go back every Friday and just hang out with everybody and have a drink with them in the canteen before they went and did the news at 7 o'clock. And I did that for enough months that eventually the guy who was the art director there, Bruno Liepen, um, fantastic guy from the Ukraine who ran the graphics department. I think he just gave me a job to shut me up more than anything else, and stop hassling him to give him a job. And so I started working in the graphics department, and I was doing the weather maps for the news, and I was doing some of the graphics for the news. And I was doing a couple of little shows, and I'd been there about 3 months. And he called me into his office one day and he said, I need you to come in. I need you to sit down and I need you to close the door. And I thought, oh no, I'm going to get fired. Um, and he looked at me and he goes, no, no, it's not that. You're not going to get fired. He said, I need you to come in and sit down because I just want to talk to you privately about this. I need you to sit down because when I tell you what I'm going to tell you, you're going to laugh your head off. He said, that big box that's been sitting out in the hallway for a couple of weeks? Um, they say it's a computer that does graphics. And we both just cracked up laughing because there was literally nothing. We had been assessing, whether computers could be helpful in what we were doing, but the only systems that we were able to see were the kind of CAD systems that were being used for architecture at the time. And while you could make a great looking wireframe teapot, that didn't help us doing graphics with politicians' faces. So he said, "So look, you've got the least program commitments. Keeping in mind, I'm like 17 at the time. You have the least program commitments of anybody in the department. Um, Engineering are going to put it together, jump on it, see what you think, and when it's a piece of garbage, let me know and we'll get rid of it." This thing was, close to $2 million to buy at the time. It was
Oh,
insane.
wow.
Um, and what it ended up being was the Quantel paint box. And the Quantel paint box was the very first paint system made for television in the world, um, made for anything in the world. And I it was the first system also that had a pen and tablet. And the tablet weighed about as much as your car. It was just a huge steel tablet. The pen was steel, the cable was steel. It was all heavy and unwieldy and kind of a pain in the neck. But I touched pen to tablet and saw this cursor moving around on the screen, and my brain, you talk about Star Trek, it was like a mind meld. I had a mind meld with this device, and I realized, yeah, this is what I'm meant to do. So I went back to Bruno the next morning and I said to him, okay, you need to sit down and you need to close the door. And he
Mm.
said, why? He said, is it that bad? And I said, no, 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 just wait for it. And I said, I'm going to tell you something, and I need you to know that I have never been more sure about anything that I've ever said to anybody in my entire life as I'm about to say to you. So please listen. You must buy this system. And he said, you just think it's a cool newfangled computer and you like it. And I said, absolutely, there is some of that there. And I said, but this, just like the steam engine revolutionized industry, this is the next major industrial revolution staring us in the face. We must get on this bandwagon because if we do not, we are going to be dinosaurs in a heartbeat.
Mm.
And he said, oh, okay, show me. So I went in and I showed him some of the stuff, and his mind just went. This was at about 7:30 in the morning. So 11 and a half hours later, it's like nearly 7 o'clock. We're about to go to the air with the news. I'd spent all day just making graphics the old-fashioned way. And he said, he came in and he flicked me in the back of the head and said, okay, it's done. I said, oh, what's done? And he said, we're going to buy it. And he goes, and you're the only one who knows how to operate it. So have at it. And so I became, I think, one of the very, very small handful of first digital artists on the world, on the planet. There were only a very small number of these boxes around the world. And there were some in London. It had been invented by a team from the BBC.
Mm.
And there was some in Los Angeles. And there was this one floater that was going around the world, which ended up becoming ours. So, yeah, so started doing that. And we went from having like 8 graphic designers, if we were lucky, making 8 or 9 graphics a day, to having two of us making 50 a day.
Wow.
In just a matter of weeks. So it was a huge jump, and that was my start into digital effects.
Talk about revolutionizing the industry, in terms of giving you more workflow and more abilities than you ever had. And that's amazing.
Yeah. No, it changed everything. And I remember, so I was there for about 5 years, and then I left and I went to a company called AAV in South Melbourne, that at the time was the biggest post-production company in the Southern Hemisphere. And we were doing music videos for In Excess and Kylie Minogue and all kinds of people. That was really fun stuff, using Paintbox. And and then Quantel came out with a compositing system called Harry, and I was using that as well. And so in 1989, I decided that I wanted, my calling had always been in Los Angeles. And because that was where all the big visual effects stuff was being done. Um, at the time, the highest rating TV series in the world was Star Trek: The Next Generation. And so I came to Los Angeles with in hindsight, a completely ridiculous pipe dream. I wanted to work on, of course, I wanted to work on Star Trek: The Next Generation, and I wanted to work on the original MacGyver series, and I wanted to work on Star Wars. Like I've got a presentation that I do for university students, and I go, so, of course, why not? Not realizing what was I thinking. Um, so I came and did a quick scout in Los Angeles, meeting people at a meeting like Richard Edlund at Boss Films and Harrison Ellenshaw at Disney and all kinds of people, all heroes of mine, who I was astounded that they actually took the time to meet me. But I met Richard Edlund, and Richard said, um, you know, you're really good at this. And he said, I think that this is probably going to be something that we want to do at this company. So if you go back to Australia and you get rid of everything, you come back and I'll give you a job. And so I took that seriously. And so I went back to Australia and made the preparations to move to the States. Came to the States, and his general manager said, "Yeah, we're not doing that. Digital is a flash in the pan.
Oh my,
Um, it's a flash in the pan. It's never going to be anything. Film optical is a state of the art. That's the way it's going to be forever." Um, Unwise words. And so I spent 3 months, and I thought, okay, look, I'm going to set myself a goal of 3 months. If I, again, naively thinking, if I can't get a job in Hollywood in 3 months, then I'll get the message and I'll go back home. Um, Knowing that the job I wanted was like the highest rating show in the world, and hey, why not? Of course. So I ended up getting a job at ABC Television in Hollywood, which was great through friends of mine. I was introduced to the woman who ran that group, a woman called Barbara Eddy, and she gave me a job in the on-air promo department. And I was again one of the handful of really good Harry artists in the world because I had so much experience on this box. And so she took me under her wing in that department. And the catch of that was that she said, and we will sponsor you for your green card,
oh,
uh, which was wonderful. So ABC sponsored me. Um, Before I had that job, one of the interviews that I'd had was with a guy at a company called the Post Group. This guy, Rich, who ran the Post Group, was the biggest post-production company in the world, and they were doing all the visual effects for Star Trek: The Next Generation.
oh wow.
And I had had a meeting with him, and he looked at my demo reel and he said, "Look, this is really great. I love your work, but I'm sorry I can't hire you." And I was mortified because I thought, well, this is what I wanted to do. This is why I came to the States. I wanted to work on Star Trek. And so I felt pretty crushed. And he said, but it's okay. We'll talk again at some point, and maybe things will change. Anyway, so I was working at ABC, and I'd been there for 7 months. And one night, the phone rang, and it was Rich from the Post Group, and he said, "Hey, so can you talk?" I said, "Yeah, sure." I was literally doing a graphic for um, Pale Rider, the Clint Eastwood film, and he
Wow.
said, "So we're doing it." And I said, What are you doing?" And he said, "I'm just going to back up a little bit and tell you something. You know, when I told you that I couldn't hire you? Yeah, it wasn't because I couldn't hire you. It was because I didn't want to." And I thought, well, that's lovely. And
Wow.
he said, "No, I didn't want to because I didn't want to hire you there. Because what no one knew at the time was that I was planning to leave the company and start my own company, Digital Magic. We've started that company, and I want you to come and join us."
Oh, that's
And
awesome.
and so he wanted me to come and work as the assistant to a guy called Steve Price. Steve Price was the lead animator on Star Trek: The Next Generation. And so I was working as his assistant. And so this was on a Friday night. He said, how how soon can you be here? And I said, "I'll be there Monday." And he said, "And by the way, I know the catch is that ABC is sponsoring your green card, so we're going to pick that up and we're going to sponsor you instead." So I had legal work in the States on the show that I dreamed of working on. Um, Now, the thing was that was going to be assisting Steve, so I wasn't going to be doing all the work. He'd done the first 4 seasons of Next Generation, and they were right at the very end of season 4. And he was doing a big cliffhanger episode where we knew that the first episode of season 5 was going to be the other half of that cliffhanger, and it had to all look the same. Um, and right at the end of season 4, Steve left the company and went up to work at ILM. To go, he was working on Hook. Um, he was doing things like Tinkerbell's Footsteps and Pixie Dust and stuff for Tinkerbell and Hook. And so that the weekend that he left was a very bad weekend for me because I thought, great, I finally got the job of my dreams, um, on the show of my dreams, and I'm going to come back to on Monday. There won't be a job. And so not a good weekend. Came back in on Monday. Rich came and closed the door, and he said, "So I've got good news and I've got bad news." And I said, "Oh, please tell me the bad news first." And he said, "Well, the bad news is that the studio is kind of upset because Steve's leaving, and um, They were hoping that he was going to stay, but he's not. He's going to this other gig. Um, and so I've been kind of talking them off the ledge a little bit this weekend. And I said, "Oh, great. Well, what's the good news?" And he goes, "Well, the good news is you're it." And so overnight, I became the lead animator on Next Generation.
Oh wow.
And so trial by fire, the first episode I got to do was the first episode of season 5. And it was a cliffhanger and it all had to look exactly the same as Steve had been doing. So I just crammed training up on copying his style. And then after I'd done a couple of episodes into the season, I went to them and I went, it was Rob Legato and Dan Curry and Ron Moore and Dave Takamura and Gary Hutzel. And I said to all those guys, I, I'd like to propose something. And they said, "What's that?" And I said, "You know, I just want the phasers to feel better because that's what I was animating phasers and photon torpedoes and all that stuff. I want them to look more realistic." And they said, "What do you mean?" And I said, "Well, if I get a light source and it's a beam of light traveling in front of me, what happens to my face?" And they said, "Tell us." I said, "It lights up and it casts shadows." And they said, "Okay." And I said, "Well, I want to do that. I want to make the beams themselves feel more powerful and more kind of mechanically engineered rather than hand painted. And I want them to interact with the environment. I want them to light up faces and light up sets and cast shadows." And I remember Rob Legato looked at me and he said, "If you can do it in the same amount of time that Steve did, you're on." And so I spent the next few days just jamming again to try and work out how to do that. And I painted 3 layers of animation, like a hot white core, and then a kind of squiggly line element that went over the top of that, and then a glow that went on top of that. And then I know everybody has their thoughts about JJ and his film, and the lens flares. Unfortunately, I was the one who introduced lens flares to Star Trek. I introduced the kind of anamorphic blue split, um, because I thought, well, if it's a light source and you're dealing with a camera lens, if you want it to feel like it's really there and not just painted on, it's going to affect the coating on the lens. And so we should be painting all that stuff in. And so we changed all of that. And at the end of that year, we got a nomination for the Emmys, which was incredible. First year in the States, and I got not one, but two Emmy nominations, one for Conundrum and one for A Matter of Time. And
Both of which are great episodes. I mean, really well done.
they're phenomenal. I loved A Matter of Time because it was Matt Frewer who was Max Headroom and just, really fun stuff. But Conundrum was fun because I got to do this shot on the bridge where Riker and Worf fire the phasers at the bad guy in the episode, and it peels his skin away and reveals the alien underneath him. And that was some really early motion control stuff that Rob did. Of the head, and then I animated all the reveal behind it and the beams and all that stuff. So then we went to the Emmys that night and we won them both, which was astounding. Um, and that's those two up there. But yeah, so
Let's freeze frame there for a moment because I want to talk to you about going to the Emmys that night and what was that like for you sitting there and hearing, your team and your names being read off and tell me about that.
Oh,
it was absolutely surreal. Um, I had always wanted to go to the Emmys. I'd always wanted to go to the Oscars. But growing up in Melbourne, that wasn't going to happen. Not likely. Um, I I was so thrilled to be there. Um, but once you're there, you're there. So you just immerse yourself in the thing. But walking down the red carpet and seeing, the room filled with stars from every show that you've ever known, was astounding. When they read out the winner, the first winner, they said, actually, this year there are two winners. And the team that was there with, all the guys, I think it was Gary Hutzel, turned around and looked at me and went, "Ah, we're done. we put up too many episodes. We shouldn't have done that. We're not going to win this year again because they've been nominated every year, but they'd never won before for visual effects. Um, and so they read out the first winner, and it was, I think, Matter of Time was the first one. And we all just looked at each other and went, "Oh wow, that's us." So we had to go up there, and there were, I think, like 7 or 8 of us in that crew that were on the nomination, and many more people who worked on the episode. Always, it's the tough thing about the awards that you only get a certain number of people who actually get to be on the award, but there are so many people who contribute toward it.
Sure.
And so we went up there, and you know, speeches were made, things were done, and then we were all walking off stage, and I was the last one walking off. And Marlee Matlin was presenting the second one, and she said, and the second winner is Star Trek: The Next Generation Conundrum. And I was halfway down the stairs, and I turned around and I looked at her, and the floor manager grabbed me off stage and he goes, "No, no, you got to come this way." And I went, "Well, we won this one too." He goes, "Oh, then go back." And so the crew for that show was still in the audience. I was the only one on stage. So I walked straight up and she just handed me the award. And so I've got a photo somewhere of me standing on stage at the Emmys all by myself, up at the mic going, "Guys, get up here now." Um, and so team came up. We got the second one, which was just incredible. I'm standing there with one in each hand. And then we walked off stage. And as we walked off stage, Patrick Stewart and LeVar Burton were both standing at the bottom of the staircase, just in support of us, which was wonderful. And then they led us all out to the press room. And we walked into the press room, and the person greeting us at the door was Cyndi Lauper. And she just came up and gave everybody big hugs, and they said, "Okay, now go take photos." And that was our night. Um, it was incredible. It was absolutely amazing and something I will never forget.
I can imagine. I mean, to have basically two of the episodes that, that you guys put up for the nomination win and tie with each other. And then, I mean, that speaks volumes to the quality of work that you and the team did for these two episodes.
Very surreal.
It was an incredible team. All of those people are still friends of mine. Some of them we don't spend that much time talking to each other, but some of them I talk to regularly. People like Ron Moore and Dan Curry, who are both very dear friends of mine, and Dave Takamura, who I ended up working with again recently on the series Evil on CBS. Um, just really good people, and sadly we lost Gary Hutzel a few years ago. He died. Rob Legato went on to do Apollo 13 and Titanic and Lion King and amazing films. Rob's a legend. But all of those guys are, and they're just an amazing group of people, and I was very blessed to work with them and learn from them.
Yeah, we actually had a conversation, an interview with Dan Curry not too long ago for the magazine that we put out, Engage magazine.
Yeah,
He was a joy to talk to, actually, just like a font of information, and we loved it. It was great.
yeah, Dan's awesome. He's a great guy, and one of the things that I talk to people about always is the importance of having mentors in your life. And out of that group, um, definitely Dan and Ron Moore. Um, Ron Moore, the visual effects guy, not Ron Moore, the writer. Um, those guys they've been a very important part of my life, and very, very dear friends who um, I'm lucky to be friends with still 30 years later.
Now, I know that you went on to work. You did an extensive amount of work in the final three seasons of Next Generation. You won an Emmy for the finale, like we talked about earlier, All Good Things.
Yep.
But you did go on to do some work on DS9 and Voyager and Enterprise, correct?
Yeah, well, the thing was that because I had redesigned what my thing ended up being was the designer of weaponry. and beams. I was the beam guy. And so I made a standardized pack of elements that any of the artists who were working on the show could use so that the Federation phases always looked the same. That was a really important thing for me that, there was consistency with all of that stuff. But then we started designing weaponry for other races and Kardashians and Bajorans and everybody. And so I would then remake some of the elements so that or recomposite them using different colors or different intensities of texture, um, so that they all had their own kind of handprint. Um, but even just silly little things like a barber on the ship with a little beam, just the trimming hair, medical
Mhm.
beams, barber's beams. There's an episode of Next Generation called The Game where they put on a headset and they had beams going in their eyes. I did all those. Um, you know, it was a huge amount of work, and what was good was that as Next Gen was finishing, we folded over into the other shows, and I just kept on designing all that stuff. And so I did a lot of work on Voyager. At the time, we were still Digital Magic. Um, and then, because of various stuff that was happening within the company, I ended up leaving with two other guys from the company. The three of us left in 1 week. And we went to a company called Pacific Ocean Post, otherwise known as POP, also in Santa Monica in California. And amazingly, Star Trek followed us.
Really?
Um, and so we were very lucky to be able to continue working on Star Trek at the new company. Um, and then Deep Space Nine was happening at the same time, and so they decided, look, what, we're gonna split them off, and we're gonna take Voyager back to Digital Magic, and we're gonna leave Deep Space, most of it, at POP. And so that's what we did. And occasionally we would have episodes where we'd pick up some of the slack from the other company and do extra work. But fundamentally, I mean, I designed the weaponry for all of the series. And then when they, years later ended up doing Enterprise, I got called in to do one episode in particular for that, which um, I think it's called Broken Ice. And they're on an ice planet, and two of the characters build a snowman. And as a joke, they get their faces and they carve a smiley face in the thing. So I did that and ended up getting another nomination for that, which was amazing. Didn't win, but over the years I got won four, but I got nine nominations in total, and that's crazy. It's crazy.
Pretty
Um,
incredible.
yeah, very lucky. And the funny thing, going back to the original thing of coming to the States with this pipe dream, one of the other things that happened at Digital Magic was that, yes, I wanted to work on Next Generation, and I did. I also wanted to work on MacGyver, and about 2 years into the time there, I ended up working on MacGyver as the lead animator for that series and got to know Richard Dean Anderson really well, who was the star, and Mike Greenberg, who was the producer, who I just spoke with last week. He's still a dear friend of mine. Um, and and then the other one was Star Wars. And Star Wars wasn't going to happen. It was on my list, but obviously it wasn't going to happen because he'd already made his three films. And he knew he was going to make more, but no one else did. And so George had the plan, and that was all good. But I thought Star Wars was never going to happen. But about 10 years after I got here, I got the call from ILM to say, can you come up and work on a film called Master and Commander? And so I went up to work on that. It was a 4 week gig. There was a problem that they needed solving, and Pablo Hellman, who's one of the lead supervisors up there now, who had worked with me at Digital Magic, um, he called them and he said, I don't know how we're going to solve this problem. I think you should call in the big gun. Turned out the big gun was me. And I went up and worked out what a solution was that night. And the next morning, the director, Peter Weir, was in my office, and I was stunned because he's a hero of mine from Picnic at Hanging Rock and amazing films that he's made. Um, and he turned around to Jim Morris and he said, look, you need to hire this guy full time. And so I did. Jim did. He said to me, "Are you available?" I said, "Yes." Okay, okay, you're hired. And one of the films that I ended up doing while I was there was Star Wars. So yeah,
Nice.
the list of three ended up happening. I was very lucky.
Dream fulfilled.
Check,
Yeah.
check, check.
I I uh I knew we're stepping back from Star Trek here, but since we're doing so, I looked at this impressive list of credits that you have from I saw MacGyver, I saw Baywatch, I saw uh the Young Indiana Jones, Chronicles of the Young Indiana Jones, which is
Wow.
actually one of my favorite shows to watch
Mhm.
as an archaeologist, you know. So I was just curious, for your other television credits, right?
Hmm.
Do you have a favorite that you worked on that you got to really just get in there and animate and play like it was your sandbox and
It was an interesting time because we were working on so many shows at the same time.
Mhm.
Um, I I particularly loved an episode of Tales from the Crypt that I worked on, that had Tim Curry playing three separate members of a family. And one of the shots that I had to do in that was a composite of him playing all three characters, mother, father, and daughter. Um, that was really fun. And I got to meet some incredible people on that. Stephanie Powell, who was the visual effects supervisor, and Todd Masters, who did the makeup. And Todd's still a dear friend of mine. Um, I there are just so many shows. At the toward the end of the time of Digital Magic, we had started Quantel, who made Paintbox, and Harry made a system called Domino. And Domino was the very first digital system created to do visual effects for feature film.
Hmm.
Um, and it basically took everything that Harry was and upgraded it to 2K resolution. And so we had, I think, the first Domino in the country. Uh, and the reason I'm talking about that is because there were so many shows that I worked on. My real sandbox in television was Star Trek. Um, but what ended up happening then with the feature film was that we got some really fun projects, and one that I particularly love to this day, and I'm still friends with the director, was The Sandlot,
Hmm.
which was just such a fun film to work on. And David Mickey Evans, who's the director, is just an incredibly sweet guy. Somewhere up on that shelf, there's a baseball that he gave me from the 30th anniversary of the movie, that's signed by him and a whole bunch of the cast. Um, but yeah, look, there were so many shows. I mean, we did really fun shows like Viper, um, which was a great sci-fi series, with morphing cars and all kinds of stuff. Before there was any morphing, we were working on a lot of that stuff with other companies as well. But
Yeah.
yeah,
I
lot,
noticed
lots of
that of your film credits, it basically reads as a litany of all, my favorite childhood films. I mean, Dumb and Dumber and Toys
Oh my
and
God.
Armageddon,
Oh
Starship
my
Troopers. I
God.
mean, all of these, The
Yes.
Sandlot, what you just mentioned, Titanic.
Titanic. Yeah.
Um,
That's
it
amazing.
it really is, and I'm just kind of wondering, of those films, is there one that challenged you the most or that you enjoyed the most in terms of okay, go ahead.
yeah. I mean, look, every film is a challenge.
Sure.
Um, I say to people all the time that we are glorified problem solvers. As a compositor, I thought of myself as a glorified sandwich maker. I just took really nice elements and made a really nice sandwich, that I hoped everybody enjoyed. Um, but from a feature film point of view, the one that gave me some of the biggest challenges, and one biggest challenge in particular, was Titanic.
Oh,
Uh,
Mhm.
there's a shot in Titanic of, just before Jack and Rose get off the ship. There's a shot of them below decks where they see a little boy who's about to get engulfed by water coming down one of the corridors, and the father comes and grabs the little boy, and then they get destroyed by the water breaking through the door. And Jack and Rose run around a corner, and there's one long 10-second shot of them just running down the corridor toward camera, slow motion shot.
Mhm.
And I was digital effects supervising for the film at POP, what then became POP Film, which was the film unit of Pacific Ocean Post. And the producer on the show came to me and he said, "So we've got a bit of a problem. We have this shot, and Jim, James Cameron, Jim was the camera operator, so no one wants to tell him that the elements are difficult to use. But they took it to ILM, and ILM said, no, this shot is not possible with these elements. And they took it to Digital Domain, which Jim owned at the time. Um, and they said, no, this shot is not possible with these elements. So, so we're coming to you. What do you think?" And I looked at it and I said, well, I guess it's possible. Like, it's only time and money. And if you've got the money, I'll make the time. And this producer looked at me and he goes, okay, let me go tell Jim that. And so he went back to Lightstorm and sat down with Jim and told him what I had said. And Jim goes, that is the correct answer. He has the job. Um, so when people look at that shot, um, do you know anything about the history of that shot?
Oh,
So I've seen this movie 29 times in the theaters. I know it like the back of my hand. So yes.
yes.
So what do you think the visual effect is in that shot?
Um, what do I think is the visual effect in that shot? That's a good question. The
Um,
lights that are no.
yeah, no, uh, I want to say the actual, I don't know if this is a visual effect, but you know, running in slow motion and then having,
To speed it up. No, I don't think
yes.
that's it.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, you're running in slow motion, and then you're finally getting there, and then all of a sudden, everything behind you is just going bam, all at once, and it's a. I mean, there was a lot
There's a lot
in
going
that
on.
little bitty scene.
I'm not sure.
So it was not Jack and Rose running down the hallway.
Really?
It was two stunt doubles.
Okay.
And what we had to
Oh,
do was take the stunt doubles' heads off and replace them with Kate and Leo's faces.
wow.
Wow.
Now, the problem was that they had the stunt doubles running down the hallway, which was a steel-walled set with a few 100,000 gallon dump tank of water dumping. It was real water
Mhm.
exploding down the set behind them. Jim was in a wetsuit, which you can't see because he's holding the camera, and the camera was on a bungee cord, and there was a hole in the top of the set. And as the water hit him, he let go of the camera, and the camera shot up through the hole in the ceiling. Camera operators grabbed the camera, divers came in, made sure the stunt people were okay. Unfortunately, take one, the guy who was doubling for Leo, it's Kate in front and Leo behind. The guy who was doubling for Leo ran around the corner, and we see all this in slow motion because it's a slow motion shot. His foot hit the ground just a little wonky, and he went down and he hit the wall and he smacked his head into the wall and he was unconscious. So you see Sarah, who was doubling for Kate, she's running forward and past camera, and um, scuba divers running in, jumping into the water and dragging this guy out. So take two, new stuntman. The other guy was recovering, so they got somebody else to do the stunt. He did not slip. But when there's running in slow motion, their feet are hitting the ground and their skin is jiggling and there's water splashing on them and moving in front of them and hairs moving around and sticking to their faces. And um, I I realized that there was no way. And then they shot Kate and Leo running down the hallway, but it was down a dry hallway, which was great. It was safe for them. But the problem was that the lights were all flicking on and off, and it was not a computer controlled light flick. It was just a guy out the back just doing this. So when you got the take of the stunt doubles and you got the take of, say, Kate, you go to say frame 10, and the lights are on Kate and off on the stunt doubles.
Ugh.
And none of them were matching all the way through the thing. So it's a 240 frame shot. So I ended up hand painting their faces for 240 frames and hand painting the jiggle and hand painting and rotoscoping some of the real hair that was there. But basically painted their faces completely. Um, we got to the end of the movie, and I went to a screening at 20th Century Fox, and Jim was there, and he came up to me, and he used to call me Mr. Face Replacement. He goes, "So, you know why that was so hard, don't you?" And I said, "Well, yeah, I hand painted it all." And he goes, "No, there's a much cooler reason why it was so hard." And I said, "What's that, Jim?" And he said, "It's never been done before."
Yeah.
And it was the first time, apparently, that a full head replacement had been done, like over that duration and in slow motion and up that close to camera, ever. Um, so, we pulled it off. I pulled it off. I did the entire shot myself.
Wow.
Um, and
Fantastic.
it was
Oh my
fun.
God.
Huge challenge. The one side story that I have about that shot, which is one of my favorite stories from my entire career, is that the guy who owned POP was a guy called Alan Kozlowski. And Alan was a musician as well, and he had lots of friends who were very high-powered musicians in the business. And because concentration and attention was just so essential for doing this shot, no one was really allowed in the room while I was doing work on it, except Alan. And so one night I was working, sitting in there, and it was like, it was ridiculous. It was like 17 hours a day, 7 days a week for 2.5 months to
Wow.
do that shot, just one 10-second shot. Um, and there was a knock on the door, and I kind of said, "Yeah, who is it?" And he goes, "It's Alan. Like, I've got somebody here. I think you'd like to meet. Do you mind if we come in?" And I was so focused. I just went, "Oh yeah, okay. Here, come in, come in." I didn't look back, and I heard somebody sit down next to me, and I had one of those realizations. When you focus so hard on something and you think something just happened over there, and I think I should probably be looking over there and not at this. It's going to kill my concentration and focus on this thing, but okay, I'm going to turn around. And so I turned around and looked at the guy, and the guy sitting next to me was George Harrison from the Beatles.
Oh my gosh.
And he and Alan were old friends. And he was just visiting Alan. This is only a few years before George died. And and he was fascinated by the pen and tablet technology. And so Alan had said, "Well, come down and talk to Adam because he'll show you, all this stuff." And he's working on this really cool shot. And so George said to me, "So how does it work?" And I said, "Would you like to have a go?" And he goes, "Oh, absolutely." He said, "Just get me like an empty frame and I can have a squiggle and that'd be great." And I said, "Okay, I can't believe I'm going to say this to you because you're you. Uh, but no, I'm not going to stop. I'm not going to give you a clean frame. If you want to have a play with this, you've got to work on this shot." And he just went white and he goes, "What do you mean?" And I said, "Look, see that little right in the is like frame 150 of the shot." I said, "See that little dot of highlight on frame 149 on Kate's forehead?" And he goes, "Yeah." I said, "Well, look, this is how you hold the pen. This is how you select a color. And like, this is kind of how you paint it. And then just try that. See if you can just paint the dot on her forehead, just on that on frame 150." And so George sat there and he was like really focused and he's working on this thing. And I said, "Okay, great. Now there you go." And so he was thrilled to have just been able to try out the machine. And so at the screening, when Jim said, "It's never been done before," and I said, "Well, there's something else that you need to know about the shot." And he said, "What's that?" And I said, "It was worked on by one of the Beatles." And and he was just like,
Wow. That's a great experience to have.
yeah,
Kind of a
it was
shock.
very cool. And George was a really lovely guy, and he said, "Okay, look, you're focusing too hard. Just stop and come out and have a cup of coffee." And so we went out into the lobby of POP Film, and I sat there for like 40 minutes and just talked with him about music and film. And he was the guy who financed the Monty Python films when no one else would. And so that was great. And then it was funny because about a year later, I ended up working on the last Beatles music video, um, which they did just before George died, and Free as a Bird. And We a whole bunch of us at POP worked on that, and so it was nice to have kind of played with him, but also worked on one of the Beatles music videos, which is insane.
It's pretty good. Now that you bring up music videos, I read that you worked on at least one Michael Jackson video. Remember the time? Is that the right
Yeah,
one?
I worked with Michael 3 times, but the biggest music video one was Remember the Time, and that
Hmm.
was at Digital Magic. It had been a very long week, and my boss Rich came to me at about 5:30 on a Friday night and said, "Look, I need you to stay and work on a project tonight." And I said, "Oh, look, it's been a really hard week. I was doing double shifts because we had cliffhangers for I think Next Generation and MacGyver, and it was just a huge amount of work." And I said, "I really just want to go home." And he said, "No, you are going to stay and you are going to do this job and you are going to like it. I know." And so, okay. So I wrapped up whatever I was working on at that moment, and a guy walked into the room, and it was John Singleton, the director. And so I was thrilled to meet him, and I still had no idea what the project was. And I said, "So, okay, hey, John, come on in. What are we working on?" And he said, "I can't tell you. I can't actually say out loud what we're working on. But I've got the tape and you can play that and then we'll go from there." So we threw in the tape and there was the cut of Remember the Time. And I just looked at him and I went, "Are you serious?" And he goes, yeah, yeah. He said, "Look, the thing is, it's like a 15-minute video and Michael was not happy with some of the music at the very beginning of it. And
Mm.
so we were upstairs in the Lantana Center with Digital Magic, and downstairs was Skywalker Sound, George Lucas's sound company, the LA office. And he said he's downstairs right now, just jamming, making up new music for the first little intro. Uh, and while we were doing that, he said, "There's a few effects shots that I'm not fully, excuse me, not fully happy with. There's a visual effects company upstairs. You should go and see if they've got some time and see if they can help us." And so the all of the big morphing stuff that was done in that was beautifully done by Carl Rosenthal's company, PDI, and that there just hadn't been enough time for them to get everything done to Michael's level of happiness. And he was an absolute stickler for quality and attention to detail, and they had done beautiful work, which was absolutely groundbreaking at the time. But like as happens on many projects, you just run out of time. And
Mhm.
so um, there's shots of Michael from behind siphoning sand out of his hand. So I animated all of that. And there's a bunch of other shots in it. There was a shot of Michael and Iman kissing, and they never actually touched lips all the way down. And John felt that that should be changed, so I painted their lips together, and I insisted on having a little break in the middle, so there's like they're taking a breath and going back into it. And so yeah, worked on that, and that was a really fun project. But it was supposed to be like a couple of hours, and
Mhm.
it was going to air, I think, at 9 p.m. on the Saturday night. We went straight through from 5:30 Friday night to like 5 minutes to 9 on
Hmm.
Saturday night. And one of the senior colorists at the company, Randy Starnes, he was doing color on it, and some of the editors were dropping in shots just at the very last minute to get it all into the final assembled master. And then um, we literally played it from our digital tape deck in the machine room straight out. It was like something from broadcast news. There was a cable going from the machine room through the lobby, down the stairs, across the parking lot into a live broadcast van, and they did the satellite uplink from our parking lot to the
Wow.
world, to MTV that night. And it was finished being assembled just minutes before it went to air.
Oh my
Um,
gosh.
but during the night, it was probably 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning. Um, John Singleton looked at me and he goes, "Okay, you have to stop. You haven't stopped all night. You've got to have a break." He said, "I got to tell you, the coffee downstairs is better than the coffee up here. Come downstairs and have some coffee." wasn't actually true, but I didn't realize he had an ulterior motive. So we went downstairs and made some coffee, and he goes, "Look, just come and sit over in here and just like have a relax for a few minutes before you go back to work." And we went into one of the studios, and there on the other side of the glass was Michael Jackson, um, just jamming, making new music. And
Wow.
he looked up and he saw us in there, and he goes, "Is this the guy?" And John went, "Yeah." And so he came running into the room and he goes, "It's so good to meet you." And he grabbed my hand and he said, "Show me." And he grabbed me by the hand and just launched me out of the room. So we ran upstairs and he sat with me for, I don't know, a good amount of time. And we just went through every single shot that we were working on. And it was just a mind-blowing experience to
Oh,
sit with him and show him the work that we were doing. Um, And, just a few years earlier, I had been in Melbourne watching him on stage for the Bad tour. And then here I was, working with him. Um,
Was he giving
I,
you input about what he wanted out of the shots? And
yeah,
you,
yeah, he was incredibly detail oriented and just a really sweet guy. Genius, absolute genius. And it was a big thrill to do that. Then a few years later, uh, I I was working at POP and I was tasked with working on a project to do with Michael. Um, he was doing the Barbara Walters interview, and he wanted to do the interview with no makeup on so that people could see his vitiligo and see what it really looked like. And he was very adamant about that. And so they shot the whole interview, and then, unbeknownst to him, sadly, they came to the company and they said, right, we want to paint it all back now and make it look like he doesn't have anything wrong with him. And so I spent about a week and a half animating skin and patches and stuff to make his face look like the Michael that everybody knew and loved. Um, and it went to air, and he was not happy. And apparently he called and fired a whole bunch of people um, because they had gone against his wishes. And then he called the company that I was at. And one of the people down at the front desk called me and they said, "There's a phone call for you. You need to take it." And so I answered it and he goes, "Hi, Adam, it's Michael." I said, "Hi, um, how you doing?" And he goes, I'm okay." He said, "Just, did you see the show?" And I said, "Yeah, I did." And he goes, he told me the fallout that had happened from that. And he said, the thing is, if you were working for me, I would be firing you too. But you're not. So I just have one thing to say to you." And I said, "What is that, Michael?" And he said, "That was really nice work. Thank you." And that was the last time I ever heard from him. But yeah, amazing guy.
yeah, it's amazing that he took the time to. I know he was calling to fire you, even though you didn't work for him, but like to sing your praises for the work that you did, and that's a good feeling.
He was an incredible person, and the world lost I think a severely misunderstood person. Um, he was just a good guy, and all of us who worked with him were very lucky to have
Yeah,
that experience.
yeah. I imagine it's one of those things that you carry with you that is special to you, and I don't blame you. I don't blame you. I would have loved to have worked with him myself.
yeah, we were in LA. We just had moved to LA and we realized because of it that we lived really close to his parents' house in Sherman Oaks.
Yeah.
And from our kitchen window, we actually saw the 101 being closed and his Hearst path driving by. It was so surreal.
Oh,
Like,
yeah, I
that's
watched it.
Michael Jackson right there.
Yeah,
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, it was a tough time. But the legacy he leaves is incredible and
Oh, yes.
yeah,
Forever.
yeah, very
amazing,
true.
an amazing experience to have.
Um, I want to sort of move on. Just one more question about sort of your your early career before we kind of go back to Star Trek. I know that you've spent an amazing career in graphic arts and visual effects, but I heard that you were almost a Muppeteer,
Yeah.
and I'm curious about that.
Yeah, I think I was about 19, and at the time I used to go to every single show that was happening in Melbourne. If people came and performed in Australia, I would go to every concert or play or whatever. And so I got to meet people like Bob Hope and Vincent Price and amazing people. Um, and I heard that Jim Henson was in Melbourne promoting the Muppet movie. And so I used to just I'd go to a hotel and see if I could meet people, and I would go to a stage door. And this time I called the hotel and I said, I'm this kid. And I said, hey, I'd just like to speak to Jim Henson, please. And they went, oh, okay. They put me through to a number, and this
Wow.
lady answered the phone, and she was very lovely. Um, and I explained who I was and that I would love the opportunity to speak with Mr. Henson if he's available. And she just turned around and went, hey, Jim, there's a guy on the phone for you. And it was his wife, Jane. And he didn't have any people. He didn't have any minders. It was just Jim and his wife in a hotel room. And so I had been animating a short film um, that was kind of a parody on Genesis, had a little character called Todd. Um, and I had done the voiceover for Todd, and it had this big, booming, deep voice with a big echo chamber and all kinds of stuff. And so he was asking me about that. And so I was telling him, and he said, well, so what did, I mean, first of all, I'm talking with Jim Henson on the phone. It was just mind blowing. And he was so lovely. And he said, so what did he sound like? And I said, well, it's kind of difficult to show you because I need like a big reverb and all that stuff. And he goes, it's okay. I can imagine that stuff. He said, just do the voice for me. And I said, okay, well, can I do it on one condition? And he said, what's that? And I said, I'll do Todd if you do Kermit. And so we spoke for about 6 or 7 minutes about the creation of the world and all this stuff and animated films and as Todd and Kermit. It was mind blowing. And at the end, he was laughing and I was laughing. And he said, you're really good. He said, you got a great voice. And he said, if you ever come to New York, he said, come and see me and I'll give you a job on the show.
Wow.
And I thought, oh, okay, okay. Um, and I really didn't take him seriously. Um, so that was kind of the end of that. Then go forward a number of years, and it was like 1990, I think, and I was
Hmm.
working at ABC, and one of the shows that I got to work on was Jim Henson's Dinosaurs, and my friend Dave Wong designed the logo of the kind of Ben-Hur style thing, but I actually illustrated the logo and illustrated the egg and did the crack in the egg as the main title unfolds. Um, And so I had to go to the set and meet Brian Henson and talk to him about a few things. And so that day, I was, enamored by the whole thing of being on the set with these incredible animatronics, which were very early stage animatronics for Henson's. They're beautifully done. And so I was talking to Brian, Jim's son, about just stuff. And this story came up. And he looked at me and he goes, you idiot. He said, you should have taken him up on that because you would have been working on the show. And I said, what was the show? And he said, you would have been on Sesame Street. Um, and he said, that's actually how Carol Spinney got his job. He was a street puppeteer, and Jim saw him and loved what he was doing and offered him a job on the show. And the first character he created was Big Bird.
Big bird.
Wow.
So, yeah, a missed opportunity, but everything happens for a reason. And I ended up working for Henson's anyway on that show, and just unfortunately not with Jim because he had just passed away.
Right.
Uh, but yeah, everything happens for a reason.
Well, you got to go on and work on some of the things that you had always dreamed of doing with like MacGyver and Star Trek. And so, I mean, you're right. Everything happens for a reason. And,
Yeah,
just the little bit of conversation that you had between Todd and Kermit and, just that interaction is,
Very
I mean, that's
special.
incredible right there.
Mhm.
So,
yeah, and he was just a very lovely man, and what a genius. The things, the world that he created are amazing. I think that's one of the things that I think a lot of people in the business don't really think about all that much. That it's very easy to get bogged down into just the shot you're working on at any given time. But the fact is that we're creating worlds and we're creating characters that are going to live on forever. And so I say to crews when I've got crews working for me, don't take yourself so seriously that, you think you're high and mighty, but do take the job seriously
sure,
because you never know who is sitting out there in the audience who is going to see a single shot and it's going to spark something inside them, which is going to lead them into an entire career, um, and hopefully give them a very, very good life. So give the shot the respect that it deserves.
sure, sure. Good advice.
Oh my God. Whenever I want to be the first one to ask questions.
Taking us a little bit back towards Star Trek. You worked on a very popular episode of DS9 called Trials and Tribulations,
Yeah.
which is where they very seamlessly blended like original series 1960s footage with DS9 footage. Can you talk to us a little bit about what you did on that show and how you kind of brought all that to life?
Yeah, I was working down at POP Film, and the guy who had been my assistant in the earlier years, a guy called Kevin Boucher, had taken over from me working on the show, and he was doing some beautiful work on that episode, where they had footage of Kirk and the original crew, and then footage of Captain Sisko and the Deep Space Nine crew, and they had to combine them and make it all feel like it was in the same time. Um, Gary Hutzel was the visual effects supervisor on that episode, and one of the concerns that everybody had at the beginning of that episode was that um, the show looked so rough that I think we were shooting on Kodak 5296 stock, and we were thinking that we were going to have to degrade the image that we were shooting then to match the look of the original series because everything that we were
Hmm,
used to seeing was not great.
sure.
Um, as it turned out, Gary decided in a genius moment, I want to go into the archives at Paramount and see if they still have the original cut neg of that episode. And they did.
Wow.
And so they took it to CIS. There was a Composite Image Systems, a great visual effects company who also worked on the show, doing all the blue screen comps and a bunch of other stuff. And I think Don Lee was the colorist, and Don threw the film up on the chain, and this film was razor sharp. And it turned out that there was a particular film stock that had been used to shoot that series, and it was very expensive stock to make. And when the series got canceled, ultimately, I think they just stopped using it because there was no need to make something that was so expensive all the time. But what it gave was this perfectly beautiful razor sharp image. And I remember Mike Okuda saying that they were sitting in the room and they decided, look, let's just zoom into this and see how much we can read. And there was a wide shot of the bridge with Kirk sitting in the chair, and the plaque next to the turbo lift door was sitting there. And they blew up the whole thing right into the plaque, and they could read every word of text on it.
Wow.
And so what we realized was that we were going to have to degrade the original footage to match the level of the stock that we were shooting on in 1996 or whenever it was. Um, so it was completely the other way around from how we expected to have to do it. Uh, so I was doing shots. There's one sequence where I think Cisco and Dax are playing the multi-level chess game
Mhm.
in the canteen kind of room, and a bunch of people are walking into the room. So it was getting rid of the guy who was actually sitting there and replacing him with Cisco. Um, this meant a lot of painting out of people who were there, and nowadays with generative AI and all that stuff, you can say just like, here's a mask, get rid of everything and replace it with, what's back there, even though it doesn't exist, and it will do it. In those days, we had to hand paint everything, and then we had to manually track a still frame through the shot if the camera was moving, because there was no tracking software. Now you can track a shot in seconds and it's perfect. It'll even track the focus of the lens, but we had
Hmm.
none of that. So we had to do all of that manually. Um, and so it took a long time. There's another shot in that episode where I think it's Kirk and Spock walk into the room behind Cisco, and hands were swinging like next to legs, and there was just a moment where Spock's hand disappeared because there was no hand because it was out of the frame. And I remember Judy Elkins saying to me, we've got to fix this. How are we going to do it? And so just for one part of the swing, I took Kirk's hand and put it on Spock's arm. And so it's Spock's arm swings in, Kirk's hand swings in, but all on the end of Spock's arm.
Wow.
Um, and just little visual tricks like that we did to make that shot work. But the I had a very small part in that episode, but the guys who did the bulk of the work just did beautiful work of blending it all together and making it totally believable that the Deep Space Nine crew were on the original Enterprise.
Really kind of phenomenal how they brought that to life.
And if you look at it now, it still holds up. I saw it again just recently, and our dog Stella loves Star Trek. She watches Star Trek all the time. If we go out for the day, I put Star Trek on the TV, and she watches that. And I sat down and actually watched Tribulations with her recently, and it's amazing how well it stands up. Yeah.
I love the fact that you're a Star Trek fan and not just somebody who worked on Star Trek. That's incredible.
I think it's difficult to work on something like that and not become a fan. Um, it's it's such a huge part of television history
Hmm.
and entertainment history in general. Uh, and I think, it's been a huge part of my life from 5 years old. So yeah, it's nice to have worked on it, but nice to be a fan as well. It's funny. I went back to Australia a few years ago because, of course, I've got a little cabinet here in front of my desk that's got pins of all the shows that I've worked on, and so of course I have this.
Nice.
Oh my gosh.
Got a couple of those, but I also have this one, which is not as well known, and this is from Oztrek, which was the very
Nice.
first official Star Trek
Wow.
club anywhere in the world,
Wow.
that started in Melbourne. And I went back a few years ago and spoke at one of the Oztrek conventions, and they made me an honorary lifetime member along with Majel Barrett and Gene Roddenberry and DeForest
Wow.
Kelley, a bunch of other people. But
What an
yeah,
honor.
yeah, it's nice. But you have to be a fan.
You do. You do. We were interviewing somebody before, and I don't quite remember who it was, but one of the stock questions is, were you a fan of Star Trek before you started working on it, or did you become a fan? And this person said, no, I wasn't a fan at all. It was just a job to me. And I'm like, oh, well, that's,
Yeah, I can't remember
I
who.
guess it happens. But if you devote that much time and effort into something like that, you really have to love it.
Look, I think there are multiple jobs too. I'm sure there are plenty of jobs associated with the show like there are on any show where you just go in and you do the work and you get out and then you go on to the next one and you do that. But if you, as you say, if you're on it for a long amount of time and you're doing something that is pretty much intensely creative, um, we artists can get a bit precious about our own work. But it's important to have pride in the work and make sure that it upholds a certain standard. And especially when you're talking about something with the kind of pedigree of Star Trek, you want to make sure that every single time anything is done for it, that it's maintaining that level of quality that everybody expects.
Mhm. Yeah, because you're basically pouring, your creativity and your love into this, and you want to be a high quality. And so, I think you succeeded. I think everything that you've contributed is just wonderful work. I mean, you were talking about the moment on Conundrum when Riker and somebody else they shoot the bad guy, and he like
Yeah,
I was like I can see that in my head, like, and I haven't watched that episode in God knows how long, but I can see it. So like if can stick in somebody's memory after a long time, and you did a wonderful job at it. So.
thank you. I think the thing that the big thing that happened on that show was that we had a lot of fun making it. Didn't matter which series it was.
Right.
All of those series, um, the crews who were leading them, whether it was Dan Curry or Rob Legato or Gary Hutzel, and then supported by Ron Moore and Dave Takamura and Judy Elkins and Mike Bukowskis, just incredible people. We were incredibly lucky to work with these great people who just made work fun.
Mhm.
And it helped, of course, that we're working on, one of the highest rated shows in the world. But you can still do bad work on a highest rated show in the world, and then it just lives on as bad work. And so, my thing was always, we got to make this just the best it can possibly ever be because it's going to live forever.
Mhm.
And there are some shows, plenty of shows that we worked on in those years that never saw the light of day again. But, Star Trek is there in every country in the world, playing every day and will forever.
Yes, it will.
So it's pretty amazing to be part of.
I know it'll be playing forever in my home because it's my favorite show. So, uh, would you like to take some questions from the fans?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think you said you wanted to go first, but before I do that, please raise your hand using the raise hand button at the bottom of your screen. Please remember to please keep your question brief and only stick to one question.
Nope, sorry.
Yeah,
I,
you can go ahead and go first.
thank you. Bear with me because I have a few little things to say, and everybody, please
No, no.
bear with me. I only have one question,
Okay.
but I have a few things to say.
Okay.
First of all, I, oh my God, I so relate to you. Um, uh, um, I had a similar experience when they first opened the soap opera awards for the public. I was one of them that by mistake I didn't know where I was going. Next thing I know, I'm walking on the red carpet. I have all these people. Oh, are you a newcomer? Can I get your autograph? And I'm like, I think I'm in the wrong place. I kept walking. I sat on my chair. I'm in the middle of One Life to Live. And
The section where they were all sitting.
yes, the girl next to me, she thought I was a newcomer from another soap, and I'm like, yeah, sure, we're talking. She wins. She wants me to run to the stage to pick up her thing with her, and I'm like, oh no, 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 this is your moment. And that was exciting. I cannot imagine what it is to hear your name being called. So congratulations on those four Emmys.
Thank
That
you.
is amazing. I got goosebumps.
Mhm.
Thank you so much.
Amazing. Another thing, I've always I'm a SAG actor and everybody knows this and they're going, "Oh God, not again." But I've had people saying you have to have somebody write a book about you because your stories are amazing. Forget that. You have to have somebody write a book of you My stories are not, and a lot of people think they're exciting. You are
I mean,
amazing.
George Harrison, Michael Jackson. I mean,
Oh my God. Well, I've met Paul McCartney and I've met a lot of
Wow, that's cool.
actors and a lot of musicians, but oh wow, you write a book and I'm the first one there buying it.
Okay. Yeah. Hey, if anybody wants to write it,
Seriously,
let me know.
seriously. But my question is, and this is gonna sound strange because it has nothing to do with Star Trek. I want to know how in the world a 5-year-old Adam Howard argued with a director. What about? You were 5 years old, and
I
that
was
was
5 years old.
the beginning of everything. What
Yeah,
what did you
I'm
argue about?
I'm trying to find a photo. Actually have a photo here, um, which I need to see if I can find. Just give me 1 second. Um, so I was on this kids TV show in Tokyo, and I can't find the photo. Um, but I was on this TV show in Japan, and they had decided that they wanted to have two Western kids play these brave young samurai. And sorry, I'm just looking to try and find this photo while I'm talking. Um, the show was a Saturday morning kids show, and they would do little stories that were, fun little pantomime stories. And this particular week, they had a story about a beautiful princess who was being carried through the forest and in her little sedan chair. And she gets attacked by 8 ninja warriors. And and so, of course, coming to her savior are these two brave young samurai. And the samurai ki warriors were going to be played by these two 5-year-old kids. And so they did casting at all the kindergartens around Tokyo. And they found me at one school, and they found a kid from Texas who was the other kid who was at another school. And and so we went to the studio and did full wardrobe and set up, and they made wigs for us, and they made samurai costumes for us. And that was all exciting enough for me. That was absolutely incredible. But then we went to the day of the shoot, and I'm so frustrated I can't. Oh, here it is. I found it. So on the day of the shoot, I walked onto the set, and there's this big battle sequence where the ninjas are all fighting, and they're adult stuntmen, and there's like 8 of them, and there's these two little kids. And so the stuntmen come out, and they've got real swords. They were probably made of aluminum, but they were metal swords. To me, they were real. Um, and I had this dinky little plastic inflatable sword thing. And I went up to the director and I said, listen, this isn't fair. And he, what are you talking about? And I said, look, we've only got 15 seconds. We've got to kill all of them. We've got plastic swords and they've got real swords. Either we all have real swords or we all have plastic swords. And he just looked at me and he went, shut up, kid, just do the scene. And so we spectacularly killed these guys with our little plastic swords. Um, but I don't know if you can see this, but that's me as the samurai warrior
Oh
on
my
set.
God, look.
oh my gosh, that's adorable.
That is so adorable.
That's like
Dude,
1968, I think.
it's still
Um,
same smile. You have that smile is still there. That's the smile.
there's
Look at that. That
another
smile.
one
Oh my God.
Wow.
just in there in the on the left. So this character, the donkey character, the costume, he was the star of the show, and And so I'm still amazed that I have photos from that because it's 1968. But yeah, that was my start in the business. Now, a funny thing going forward many years, I worked on Rush Hour 3 with Jackie Chan and Chris Tucker.
Uh,
And in that film, there's a huge sword fight that happens at the end of the film on the Eiffel Tower. So we went to Paris and we shot on the Eiffel Tower. And then we came back to Los Angeles and we built a small section of the Eiffel Tower on stage at Culver Studios. And I was friendly with the props guy. And this story had come up, over the course of the months that we were working on this movie. And on the very last day, he came up to me with his two bags and just handed them to me and said, "These are yours." And so I took them home and they were the swords. They were the stunt swords, but it was nice to. I finally got my sword,
oh,
uh, but it was only like 50 plus years later. Um,
That's a
that's
great story.
amazing. You do have to write a book. I'm serious. I'm serious. I'm buying that book and reading it from cover to cut. I mean, from the whole thing.
Yeah,
okay, well, whoever
Your
out there is,
life is so exciting. You have no idea how exciting it is.
yeah.
Oh, it's amazing.
thank you.
Thank you for actually coming in and talking to us about it.
No, no, of
Thank
course.
you.
Thank you.
You could always reach out to Doug Drexler, who just put out he just wrote a book about his career too. So
Yeah, and he's having a documentary made about him too. Yeah.
Oh,
okay,
wow.
Yeah.
that now we need a documentary
Yeah.
about Adam. All right,
Well, who has questions?
Richard.
Hello, you have to forgive me. I was multitasking tonight. I worked in Australia, New Zealand, New Guinea for IT operations, so
Hi.
I know about you quite a bit in the '90s,
Oh, thank you.
and then I worked in Tokyo too. So that's where I really uh, people who have worked with you had told me about working with you. So they have like little pictures of you at their desks. So
Nice.
it was really interesting to see all your work, and you inspired a friend of mine in graphic designing.
Oh, really?
Yes, she has come from a very difficult background, and she's going to be heading to Tokyo in the next few years to do to work at one of the anime studios. It took her a while to do it, but she's now in her 30s now, and I can't believe how old we're getting. But you inspired her. Um, she's a big sci-fi person. She wanted to join the meeting today, but unfortunately, because of the time differences, she couldn't to talk to you. But I want to say thank you for inspiring her and showing her you can make the impossible possible.
What is her name?
Alana, and I can never say her last name right. It's start. I have to look it up again because I always get her last name wrong. It's a very it's a Jewish last name, and I can never say it right with the life of me.
That's
But
okay. I'm just going to say, Alana, thank you so much, and I just
Uh-huh.
wish you the very best. And maybe when this is finished, you can play this back to her, and
Yeah.
I hope all goes well with the job.
I hope so too. She's been wanting to live and work in Tokyo for as long as I've known her. I've known her now 25 years. My big question is this. I remember in '86, this is after Jim Henson had died in the '90s. Um, I was I was doing a project with my cousin because he does graphic designing and he's also a technician, so he does a little bit of everything. Um, is it true that they were trying to recruit you to do these sci-fi effects for Babylon 5 in the '90s while you were doing Star Trek?
They were trying to recruit me.
Yeah, yeah, but a lot of actresses and other people were doing both projects or
Yeah,
going back and forth.
the actors were, but no one was approaching me at the time. I mean, Babylon 5 had its own crew, and to be honest, there was no time to be doing other stuff because we were just so solidly busy on Trek. And I've got a lot of friends who worked on Babylon 5. Um, but yeah, no, they didn't recruit me.
Um, but no, but thank you for joining us tonight. I
My pleasure,
enjoyed
Richard.
I enjoy working in Australia and New Zealand and New Guinea, even though we still haven't fixed the internet issues. So please bear with us still. We're
That's
working on
okay.
fixing the
That's
internet
okay.
speeds eventually. It'll get there like the rest of the world. But I want to say thank you very much again. And
My pleasure. Thank you.
I nearly ran into you before in the 90s. Unfortunately, it just didn't work out. I met Miss Roddenberry instead of you. But it's yeah, I still enjoy that day with spending time with her and talking to her. It was a very pleasure. And this is right before her husband had this is after her husband had passed away, I should say.
Yeah.
So it
Yeah.
was they were a big inspiration, and so was Jim Hansen in my own personal career. So thank you for inspiring, like I said, showing people that the impossible and the possible can still be made. So I
My
appreciate
pleasure.
all this, and I hope I do meet you in person one day myself in my line of work. So
Thanks, Richard, very much.
no problem.
All right, thank you, Richard. Amber, one question from you for Adam.
Hey, Amber.
Konnichiwa, Adam. Hi. I also know a bit of Japanese.
Very good. Very good.
So, konnichiwa,
Where are you?
Philippines. I'm from
Oh,
Cebu,
nice.
Philippines po.
Nice.
So, yeah.
When I was living in Japan, we used to go through the Philippines on our way back to Australia, and we'd stay in Manila and visit. I loved
Oh,
Manila as a kid. It was great. Yeah.
oh my gosh. I hope you visit Manila again. Okay, so okay, I'm just like this. I'm just like this starstruck fangirl type. So like, don't mind me. So, um, well, I'm actually starstruck because like you mentioned graphic design. I'm actually taking fine arts major in advertising arts in my like college right now. I'm actually second year college, so like this meeting speaks my language. Like,
That's so cool. I mean, look, congratulations on doing that because it's a great skill set to learn, and you just do everything you can to learn everything you can.
okay, so my question is, what is your advice to young art students like me who like to pursue graphic design?
Two things. There are two things that I say to people who ask me this question. One is never give up. Never ever give up. But the second part of that is it's something that I said to somebody recently, and it's kind of been stuck in my vocabulary now. But I say, those who say you cannot did not.
Ooh, period. I'm gonna write that
So
down. Those who say, what's it?
the,
Can you repeat it again? Those
those
who
who say
say,
you cannot did not. And you know, it's true. There are so many people who will say to you, look, no, don't try that. It's too hard, or don't do you don't, are you sure you want to do that? And the thing is, if you're passionate about what you're doing and you know that it is what you're meant to be doing, just keep going. And don't listen to the people who say no. Don't listen to the people who say no. Just keep on driving toward doing that because who knows what experiences you're going to have in your life and your career, and who knows who you're going to influence in your career as well. Um, so once you know what you're passionate about, just stick with it.
period. Okay. Arigato gozaimasu.
My pleasure. Thank you.
All right, good question, Amber. Lawrence.
Hmm. So I guess my question would have to be is not Star Trek. So I think I'm gonna. I saw your credit. I was like, oh, I just saw Thomas and the Magic Railroad. I didn't know it was on credit. What was the process like
The
during the time when you guys were filming it?
that project was really short for me. I
Uh-huh.
I got a call from um, oh, I put on the spot. I can't
Was it
remember her name,
Allcross? Was it
Britt Allcroft.
Allcross?
Yeah, yeah. Britt called me and she said, we have a trailer that we want to put together for the film. Um, and we need to do it in a very short amount of time. And it was say it was a Tuesday or a Wednesday in Los Angeles. Um, And she said, I need you to come to the set. They were shooting in Toronto. And so I got on the plane that night and went straight to Toronto and met with her and Peter Fonda and other members of the cast that were there. It was amazing. And we discussed what needed to be done. And then I went back to Los Angeles. And in like a week, I was directing the trailer for it. And so we put the whole trailer together, and I was um, able to get some old friends of mine who are brilliant musicians in Los Angeles to write an original score for it. And we went to the Sony scoring stage and had a huge symphony orchestra there that was all the main um, orchestral session players in Los Angeles who were there just playing the score for us. And then we had a voiceover for it as well. And I had a choice of doing, I wanted to use either Tim Curry or Eric Idle to do the voiceover. And I thought, well, I've already worked with Tim because I worked with Tim on Tales from the Crypt. So let's try and get Eric. And my producer at the time just said, well, you're never going to get Eric Idle. I said, just try. And so they approached his people and he said, yeah, I'll do that. And so I went up to this recording studio in Los Angeles, up in North Hollywood, and walked into the room. And there's Eric Idle, who's one of my heroes from Monty Python. And I explained what I wanted, and he went, "Oh yeah, I can do that." So we did this little voice recording session, and then a few days later, we were mixing the final sound and and I was animating visual effects for it at the same time. So we were literally working around the clock to get this trailer together. But it was the very first international trailer that went out for that film. And it was fun. I went to a theater the day that the trailer was released, and I thought I'd just go into a theater and just stand at the back and see what people's reaction was. And I was standing there, and a guy came in next to me, and he had his popcorn with him. And he stood there while he was watching the trailer, and he goes, "Oh, wow, it's Eric Idle." And I thought, okay, it worked. That's good. Um, but yeah, it was not a long experience, but it was a really fun one.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I just celebrated its 25th anniversary. Can't believe I'm saying that.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Thank you. It's
Thank
nice
you,
meeting you.
Lawrence.
Thank you.
Last question is Carlos. Carlos.
Hey, Carlos.
Hello, Adam. Quick question on Armageddon. What did you do for the special effects? So that's one of my favorite movies, Armageddon. I
I
know it's
was
not Star Trek.
I was compositing supervisor for the film, and so my job was to make sure that all of the visual effects composites were done on time and on budget. And um, I, an old friend of mine, Pat McClung, was the visual effects supervisor for the show, and it was just an incredibly huge show to work on. And Michael Bay, the director, was adding extra shots as we got down toward the deadline. And so my job was just getting into all of the post-production. I think we were in 21 different post-production companies working on the film and making sure that it all got done on time. We also had a miniature department in Culver City, and so we were, keeping that all rolling as well as they built miniature space shuttles and miniature International Space Station and lots of pyrotechnics that we were doing, blowing things up, and it was a really big job, but it was a fun one.
Yeah, that movie did seem like it had tons of special effects and, like you mentioned, 21 different little projects just for that movie. So
Well,
I
21 different
appreciate
companies.
your time. Oh,
No,
20 different companies. Sorry.
yeah,
I appreciate you joining us, and you have an amazing list of credentials, especially um, sharing those stories with us, with Michael Jackson and everybody else. I appreciate your valuable time to take the time to talk to us about it. So thank
my
you so
pleasure.
much.
Thanks, Carlos, very much.
All right. Thank you, Carlos. All right. Uh, oh, I lost you there. There you go. All right. Yeah, Adam, I want to echo what Carlos said and just say that your body of work is impressive and it's amazing. And we in the Star Trek family, in the Star Trek community, we appreciate everything that you contributed to Star Trek because it's just it adds to the one thing that we all love so much, and we really appreciate all your hard work. And
Mhm.
I know that this was specifically about Voyager and all that. But thank you so much for everything that you did, and thank you
Oh,
for
my
taking the
pleasure.
time to talk to us
Oh
today.
my God, yes. Your life is amazing. Amazing.
Mhm.
Oh, very, very exciting.
Thank you. I think you know, we all have amazing experiences in our life. I've just been lucky to work on things that the general public get to experience.
Mhm.
Um, and I'm very blessed. And I'm also very lucky now. I'm engaged to a wonderful woman who is an actress and screenwriter, and we're talking about doing projects together, which is wonderful. And
Nice.
so life keeps on going, and I think you take all the really incredible experiences um, from the past, and then I mean my fiance is Lorraine Clark, and she's an amazing actress and screenwriter and award-winning screenwriter at Cannes Film Festival, and so I think you always take the experiences that you've had and use them to work to the future and to the next projects, and just keep collecting the stories.
Well, I have to well then I'm gonna throw my pitch out there.
For
I'm a stunt driver. I'm a race car driver for the movies. So
Yeah.
if you ever need a stunt driver,
give her a call.
Okay.
I'm here. You know
Absolutely.
how to reach me.
Yeah.
My name
Okay, you
is
got it.
Lisa, by the way.
Thank you.
Well, this year marks 30 years since Voyager aired for the first time. And that episode that aired would have been aired in January of this year, 30 years ago.
Yeah.
You won an Emmy for.
Yep.
So, congratulations on that. And thank you so much
Yeah,
once
it's
again.
amazing.
Yes,
It's
it's
so
beautiful.
Actually, see,
beautiful.
you can probably
Oh,
see,
can I hold it?
see the.
Emmy, Lifetime Emmy, no, Primetime Emmy
Yes. Oh
Award.
my God, yes.
Yep, in special visual effects, Star Trek Voyager Caretaker
Uh-huh.
Pilot, UPN.
UPN, yes.
There you
Visual
go.
effects and oh wow.
Can't put it any better
And
than that. So big round of applause to you,
excited.
sir, and
Thank you.
live long and prosper. Thank you so much for
You
everything. Thanks
too,
for
and
taking the
everybody.
time.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you for your time.